thanks, Nihal and Sheree, for that nice talk. And I actually think one of the fun things in overlap with Duleesha that we've got here is Duleesha bought a bus some years back and converted it into a community project, transforming the bus into a little movable house. So if you see this picture here that we've got on the screen, we've got a little homage to the bus right above Duleesha's head there.
Oh, that's what it is.
So Duleesha is, as was stated, from the Deloitte Center for the Edge, and he's been working there for, I think, since the inception of that entity for about 11 years now. And he was based in San Francisco. He's just moved to Singapore, but he's kind of like known as this. He's not wearing it now, but he's kind of this Mohawk startup whisperer. I guess the COVID is kind of let the hair grow out a bit.
Exactly.
So I've gotten to know Duleesha for maybe the past 6 months. We've been working on a project together, and so maybe we'll be able to share some of that project after the presentation today. I would love to turn it over to you now, Duleesha, and hear about some of the framework you put together here on unlocking human potential.
Sure. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Dan. Great to be on this AudaCities group. I'm very keen on this project. And here's what I'd like to do with the half an hour we have. There's a perspective we put together called Unlocking Human Potential, or the short forms of roots and shoots. I want to walk through kind of a quick presentation, about 5 or 6 slides in about 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. But the rest of it, I want to save for questions. And I'll introduce the center a little bit better. I want to start with a few images just to kick us off. But the main thing here is most of the work we do is for corporations, like corporations and how to deal with change and transformation. And this particular initiative, this particular project, this particular perspective on roots and shoots was focused on the individual, about you and I. Like if the world is changing as fast as we say it is, how does it impact us? So it's very different. And in times of COVID, where we are sitting right now, and there's so much fear and uncertainty, I think it's a good refresher to look at this, look at the framing and see how it could help us. So let's jump into it. Usually at this point, I show a couple of videos of how the world's changing, fourth industrial revolution, the robots coming to take our jobs, all of that stuff. But videos on Zoom don't work very well. So here's a static image, but it gets the point, right? The world is slowly but surely moving towards automation. And it's not just for hardware and factories like this, but it's for every aspect of our life. And from COVID, we're going to see an acceleration of all of this because we are no longer going to be able to depend on labor. So a lot more investment is going to go, this is going to speed up. And that then begs the question, what is the role of humans in a world full of robots when they can do most of what is done routinely much, much better than we can? And that's where human ingenuity, creativity, empathy, compassion, all of those very human traits come into play. So how do we bring that into our work? How do we bring that into our life? How do we amplify that? And this is why I'm really keen about what Mistletoe's doing. I'm really keen what Audacity is about. Is like it's doing that at a city scale, not even at an individual scale, not a corporate scale, but at a city scale. So how do we bring that together? And all of this creates a lot of stress and fear and uncertainty. And so I want to talk to 2 trends that we've noticed over the past few years that are picking up about how people are reacting to the stress of the role of humans in today's world. So here's the first one. The Spartan Race. I'm not seeing many people on video, but I bet you if I asked you to raise your hands, half the people in this group probably have done something like a Tough Mudder, a Spartan Race, or something like this. So one way people are reacting to this increased stress and uncertainty is to do more and more and more. You get the 4-hour week, you get it's gone from 40 under 40 to 30 under 30 to 20 under 20, like it's do more and faster. There's so much. It's like you're living in a world of FOMO, right? So there's that sort of speeding up. At the same time, we see all this trends on speeding up. you also see this slowing down. And this is an image from the Wisdom 2.0 conference, and that's Camp Grounded. It's got the digital detox, and people are back to painting, meditation. I mean, never before has yoga been asked to do so much for so many, right? It's like trying to like release all the stress that we have, but that's like slowing down to stop. And these two things are happening in parallel, but in our minds, they shouldn't be as separate. They're not two separate trends. We need both of this, right? So to put this all together, let's put it in the context of the world we're in. This is the world we're in. We're in a world, we're in what we would term a whitewater world. And if you think of our parents and our grandparents, in our grandparents' time, the world was pretty stable. It's like being in a giant steamship. You kind of know your direction, you point where you want to go, and you just head there. Your whole career is one thing. If you think of our parents, it's more like sailing. You generally know where you want to get to, and with some skillful like tacking back and forth, you get to where you want to go. Your career will have multiple stops along the way, and you'll move around a little bit. If you think of us and our kids, it's a whitewater world. It's changing all the time. It's constant change, constant disruption. And there's only so much you can do to kind of, you can't pick a career. Your college degree isn't going to last you that long. So the goal here, what you have to do is to figure out how to unlearn old practices and relearn new practices. Like just because you got through one part of the whitewater level doesn't mean you're going to get to the next level. So you got to keep unlearning and learning. And that's the world we're living in now. And this is one of our favorite quotes that we found, that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be the man who cannot read or write, but the man who has not learned how to learn. So this is all about unlearning and learning. So let me pause here. So that was a context for what we did, right? We are seeing these trains are slowing down, speeding up. We're seeing all the fear and uncertainty. We recognize that the world is fundamentally different from what it was a century ago, or even 20, 30 years ago. And that brings us to the center for the edge. So the Center for the Edge, as Sean said, was established about 11 years ago in San Francisco. And we're a very small entity out of Deloitte. And our goal is to look around the corner. Now, if you ask my colleagues, my consulting colleagues, what drives their behavior, they will tell you it's whatever keeps their clients up at night. Now, what drives our behavior is slightly different. It's what should be keeping your clients up at night and how we bring that to the table. So our mandate is to look around the corner, to look ahead, to understand how things are shifting, and then to bring that and say, given that those shifts, what would you do today? Now, we don't track technology as such. We pay attention to technology. We work with colleagues at Singularity and other entities to kind of understand it better, but we're not tracking technology. What we are doing is understanding the big, broad shifts, the systemic shifts, and the business model shifts that kind of are based on technology shifts. And we say, given that, what would you do? So in this context, we're seeing the fear, we're seeing the uncertainty, we are seeing these trends of FOMO and JOMO, trying to do as much as you can, the fear of missing out, and then stepping away from everything. We said, well, given that the world is changing so fast, how would this apply to us as individuals? Like, what do we do as all of us? So here's another analogy to bring us to kind of the unlocking human potential and the roots and shoots idea, a tree. A tree is a good analogy for this because it has both roots and shoots, and it needs both of those. It needs the roots to ground itself, to anchor itself, to get stability, and to get nutrients and water. Without roots, a tree can't grow. But it also needs shoots, right? It needs shoots to grow. That's where it gets sunlight, photosynthesis. It needs all of that in order to grow. Without shoots, it won't grow. If you take any of these two things out, it won't grow. And that's the analogy to kind of the speeding up and slowing down. If you just do one of those things, it's not enough. These two are cyclical, they are connected, and it's by doing both of these that you grow. So it's the individual elasticity that is required to survive in a whitewater world comes from developing both roots and shoots. You can't do just one or the other. So we've written a big report about this. It's got lots of details, and I'm not going to run through that, but I figured I should at least give you a summary what's included in these roots and shoots, so give a little bit more flavor. And in the Q&A, we can get into more of this if you want to, but broadly, there are 3 meta practices around roots and 3 meta practices around shoots. On the roots, this is the grounding, the anchoring, exploring your core values. What do you truly care about? Who are you like deep inside? What is it that matters to you most, right? And that requires kind of introspection. So this could be anything from journaling to working with a therapist to working with a life coach, anything that gets you deep into understanding more about what you really care about, what you stand for. Replenishing and re-energizing. It's like slowing down. This is where the yoga, the meditation, all those things come in, where it's stepping away from the constant busyness to actually slow down, to say no. So saying no is a good practice around slowing down. It's the third one in roots is cultivating community. You can't go at this alone. You need the strength of community. This is where the roots go deep into the ground in order to hold you in one place, to keep you grounded. And those communities can be communities of interest, communities of practice, something you're deeply engaged in, or something you want to, or like in learning more about, or actually doing more about. So interest is learning and practice is actually doing. These communities all ground you. So these are examples of meta practices that ground you and root you. But if you do just that, you don't grow. Like you'll be very stable, you'll be very calm, probably be quite happy or content, but you're not growing. And this whole thing we wrote about is to kind of in the whitewater world is to grow, right? So then you get into the shoots, and there are 3 shoots meta practices. Shaping serendipity. And this is our idea that you got to make space for the unknown to come into your life. You have to, it has to be deliberate. So put yourself in places where you might not know where you might, and if you get an invitation to jump into something, take that. So one example of shaping serendipity rather than it just hitting you is taking a sabbatical. Like every once in a while, it doesn't have to be a whole year, whether it's a weekend a month, whether it's a week once a year, or a few days or a long weekend, whatever it is that you can, whatever available time, go do something that you know nothing about. Go to a conference that you know nothing about, right? Go to a country that you know nothing about. Like allow for serendipity to hit you. Being uncomfortable. Again, the grounding is your comfort space. Right? That's where you're comfortable, but you don't grow from a place of comfort. So put yourself in positions where you're uncomfortable. Learn a new tool, learn a new practice, do something new. The bus that Sean referred to, it's because I was researching the maker movement. That's one of the trends I tracked for a long time. And I said, I don't know how to do a lot of these things. And we keep telling people, hey, you can go learn anything on YouTube. So I did. I went and found a bus on Craigslist. We bought a bus. We live in the city in San Francisco. We had no idea how to do anything. I pretty much learned everything. We stripped the bus down to the metal, rebuilt the whole thing as a tiny home. And all of it was done in community with people. And most of it I learned from YouTube. So be uncomfortable, put yourself in that and explore edges. All growth emerges from edges. So like continuously put yourself out there to find something new and to explore it. Like cultivate that sense of curiosity and imagination and possibility. And so those are your growth situations, right? So the shoots allow you to grow, the roots allow you to anchor. If you do both of this, that's your cycle of unlearning and learning. So one last slide, and then I want to jump into questions because I think that's what's much more interesting here. 5 principles around this. First one, it's about being proactive, not reactive. It's very easy for us to wait till something hits us, and that's what most people do. They wait until something hits us, and then you're being reactive. The reason we mapped out and framed these 6 meta practices is that so you can actually take a proactive stance to do one. We've actually built a whole system that you can go assess what you're strong in, what you're weak in. We have a whole day journal that you can actually work on doing this in very small increments, like daily tasks on any of those things in a way to like get started. Right? So be proactive. Don't wait for you. Build your capabilities in all 6 of these meta practices. You know, take your own path around it, but you got to do it. Individual elasticity, which is what's required to survive and thrive in this whitewater world, comes from developing these roots and shoots, right? So you got to develop both those practices, not one. If you're strong in one, work on the other one. It's all about unlearning and learning. This is the key point, right? It's not about learning one thing and becoming like the best in the world. Yes, you want to get to some level of mastery, but you also want to unlearn some old things and learn new ones. And technology, we didn't talk about technology until now, and this is part of why we've partnered with TransTech in doing a lot of this work, is that technology is both the problem and the solution. The world that we're inundated with technology today gives us ADD. We're like flitting from one thing to the other. We have a huge lack of attention to stick onto something. Yet at the same time, technology is also providing so many ways that we can do both roots and shoots so much better, can go so much deeper. There's a whole world of transformative technologies that are emerging that help solve for the exact problems that they've created. It's ironic in a way. And finally, you discover your passion and your purpose through these practices. Now, there's a lot of talk about finding a passion, finding a purpose, and I, for one, struggle with that because I'm like, well, I don't know what my passions are, but I don't know what my purpose is. Like all these things were like I was kind of conflicted about it. And what I found was it was by the doing of these things, by learning, not in your head, but in your body physiologically, by going through the practices of building your roots and building your shoots, that's how you figure out what your passion and purpose are. So I want to stop with that and move on to questions because I'm very curious to see if this even makes sense, if this resonates. Is this too highfalutin? Is it too impractical? Any of those?
Yeah, thanks, Duleesha. I think that there is a lot of real overlap, and part of the reason why I thought this was a great opportunity to present this Roots and Shoots framework is the tie-in to a lot of the onboarding that happens in the Audacity community. We have this framework which is known as the 3 U's for unlearn, unlock, and unleash. Yeah. And it's very aligned internal to the community about how we approach things. And first is, as you mentioned, this unlearning and relearning gives a lot of opportunities to reevaluate how you know what you know. And with your last comment there about you kind of were able to more find your purpose by through the act of doing. And I think that this is about having more of an experiential reality. So by doing things, you come to learn and understand more. And some interesting conversations we've recently had with the consciousness hacking community around the same kind of topics about participating and doing things in order to experience them. So maybe one of the questions that I would like to pose is, using this Roots and Shoots models through Deloitte's interaction with other businesses and entities, can you share any examples of where this framework has kind of been deployed and some of the success stories of how that looks in practice?
We wrote this a few years ago, like I said, as much for ourselves than for anyone else. And again, we wrote it for the individual. It's all anchored on you. We shifted the focus. We're not writing for the corporation. However, at the end, we bring it back and saying, what can corporations do given this? So for example, on the root side, corporations can allow for and sanction and promote for the employees to actually get deep into the roots, to be more grounded. And so you're seeing now, as a result of this, we actually helped Deloitte bring in a whole bunch of meditation tools and practices, yoga, all of that into our well-being program that we already had. So we're incorporating all of that into that. And we've seen this same trend with many, many companies as well, where it's not just about getting a gym membership, all that. It also, well-being and wellness is now included routinely in your, in kind of the keep healthy kind of programs that initially were all about getting exercise. So on the root side, it's that. On the shoot side, again, we managed to increase a lot of companies pushing for sabbaticals, in the example I gave you, and giving people a chance to explore, or giving a budget that you have a certain budget that you can go for conferences on your own to go learn something, getting access to things like lynda.com or anything else that allow people to go explore on their own, not just for what you're doing exactly for work. So in both these cases, we're encouraging corporations and we're giving them a framing that they can attach to get the justification to expand these programs. And they're finding by doing this that the people are more passionate, that people are more engaged, that people are more connected to what they're doing, even if what they're learning may be outside of that.
And so what do you think is sort of the next stage of this roots and fruit, the roots and shoots framework? Like how can this become a model that has a greater impact, where we're actually
So,
making changes globally? And and
and
this is kind
this
of
actually brings, yeah, this brings us back to AudaCities and why I'm really keen on this. And this is sort of the work we've been doing with TransTech. This is the same reason why Nicole got really interested in AudaCities as well, right? The work we've been doing, and we've done a bunch of work with Nicole on how do you bring this to corporations. If we can get this to the city scale, it will be so much more amazing. And I think we need you and your community to help us co-create this and reimagine what that might be. But I'm going to go back a few pages to the, so what can be done in a corporation is because a corporation is kind of run and managed a certain way. But when it comes to a city, it doesn't have the same kind of ownership over its employees or ability to control or manage the employees the same way. It's a little bit more unstructured. However, the reason companies are doing this is the same reason cities can do it. Companies are doing this so that they can attract the best talent, the most creative, imaginative people to come work for them or to work with them. Cities are going to need to attract the same people to come live in their cities. Particularly now with post-COVID, there's going to be a bunch of people who say, I don't want to live in that congestion anymore. I want to get away from this. And cities cities have been competing to get the people to work for them. If they can offer more ways for you to ground yourself and to explore at the same time, it becomes a much more attractive city. So for example, on rest and replenish, a city with more green space, a city with more walkways, a city with more ways to get out, to relax, is way more attractive. Cultivate community, a city that has community centers of every grade, of every level, is more attractive for people to be there, right? On the shoot side, things that are on the edge, whether it's your bars and food being edgy, whether it's your arts culture being edgy, whether it's the graffiti, all of those things are attractors to get people to come in. The communities that are drawn to that are the ones that are nurturing you in both your roots and shoots. So cities that kind of find ways through policy, through zoning to enable these things, to enable roots and shoots at a meta level, will be the ones that attract the most people. And it becomes a self-cycling kind of where the people come in and they kind of become the lifeblood of those communities, of those spaces that attract more to come there as well.
Yeah, so Duleesha, you're also one of sort of our on an advisory board for a city scale project that we're looking at with our Flourishing project. And so when we talk about flourishing, we're really looking at kind of a lot of different domains that construct how someone is doing. And so we're looking at, happiness, life satisfaction. We're looking at, health, whether that's physical health or mental health. Both of these are equally important. Someone's meaning and purpose, their character and virtue, as well as their close social relationships. So all of these things play a very important role. And doesn't matter how well someone is, if one of those elements went straight to zero, they would be pretty miserable. And so this Flourishing project and this conference that we're getting ready to start is really looking at how can we create environments at scale. What are the right things to measure? What are the right technologies to deploy? Is there things with greening cities? Is there with more sidewalks, making things more walkable and livable? So taking livable cities and turning them into lovable cities, or taking smart cities and turning them into wise cities. And maybe this would also be a good time to invite Jan to come in, and maybe we can do a little three-way jazz here. But this is also something that we're currently trying to get the word out about and find people that are sitting in different silos and sitting in different domains. Because when you get into the complexities of something at city scale, you no longer have the personal agency of personal well-being, or the entity, which is the place that I work in their HR program, to kind of manage that. And so it's a very fractured ecosystem to bring together to achieve city scale flourishing. And so,
So I have two projects from what you said that just got prompted. One was, I mentioned before, we were working a lot with the maker movement and the maker community.
right.
And one of the projects we did in Pittsburgh was how to convert Pittsburgh into a quote unquote maker city. And we did it with one of the local foundations, the Mellon Foundation. And the tagline was going from smart city to maker cities. Like, how do you make our cities more human again? And the idea as we went through that, it started off by saying, like, how do you kind of put in the baseline requirements to have a thriving maker community? What we ended up was, it was actually much more about the maker ethos than the maker community itself. It was the maker mindset that mattered. The people having a sense of agency to do something in their own community and to take ownership, rather than waiting for the city or someone else to do that for them. So what ended up was, we did build the framing for how you get more makers to come in and to build a thriving maker community. But really what it was your bring the lifeblood of that maker ethos. So that's an interesting one that brings it in. The second one is one we're doing right now in Singapore. You use those exact terms. How do you move Singapore from a livable city to a lovable city? And this is with Design Singapore, the URA, and MCCY. And we're partnering with them to look at that idea. And we're looking at all of the different aspects of what is love, what makes a city lovable. Is it about the basic kind of functioning aspects, or is it the sense of agency and identity? What is your relationship with it? Love is a two-way thing. You got to give back. They got to give something. It's like all of those different aspects. And so we are in the midst of doing that. So we'll see what comes out of that. But all of these are very much connected to what you and Jan are leading on AudaCities as well.
Yeah, thanks Duleesha again for coming on today in for such a short time to share about roots and shoots. I particularly like how you said that we should be shaping serendipity instead of like letting it hit you, because basically the whole Audacity community has actually been working on the serendipitous moments that things are actually happening, and all we do is just pushing and doing and just failing and trying again, and truly, it's how we grow. With regards to like how developing human potential is important in transforming cities from livable to lovable and smart to wise. I came across this very interesting podcast yesterday between a group of people that talked about how we must rethink city density, and what they touched on was something that has revealed recently because of COVID, right? Which is the marginalized societies, around the periphery of the city.
Yep.
So one of the things that like we should truly consider when we talk about transforming cities is to also think about not think about whether city density is good or bad, but what kind of city density would be beneficial for the well-being of people. So in the sense that I hope, like, with this roots and shoots model, or with the movement that, AudaCities is moving towards, we do not forget about the people who generally do not hang out with us and generally do not get access to the kind of education, knowledge, and information that we are trying to advocate here, in Audacity and with Deloitte and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Agreed. So it is kind of unfortunate that our cities are becoming more and more bifurcated into regions that the reason people came to cities was because of the density, because you saw all those things. And kids who grow up in a city have a very different sensibility about everyone else than if you grow up more isolated in either the suburbs or in a rural area, because you see much more of people who are not like you, right? It's the differences that kind of help you grow. However, now we've kind of fractalized this into different parts that you don't see that as much anymore. And even if you do see it, it's not your world. So we have to bring back more connections for the different parts of the city and the different people in the city to meet and see each other. And that's not an easy task. That's a gargantuan task.
Yeah. So I'm just being aware of time. We've got another panel coming in. So I'm going to, again, thank you so much, Duleesha, for joining us for such a short, nice, insightful talk. And anybody else that's paying attention, and wants to get more information, we'd love to send you some of Duleesha's publications on this more in-depth roots and shoots model. And now I will hand it over to Jan to introduce our next session.
Yes, thank you guys.
So thank you, Duleesha. So for the next session, which is supposed to start now, we're having the Slice team come on, and they have invited Big Idea Ventures, an alternative protein for an alternative norm. So I think it's going to be a very interesting panel as they talk about alternative protein sources. Yeah, so I guess it's Jaden and Yang, right?